Welcome. Thank you for joining us at the Center for American Progress. We are so pleased to have panelists with us from Israel, representing key voices from business, journalism, and important constituencies to discuss the crisis which Israeli democracy is facing. This is a crisis centered on the judicial overhaul proposed by the leaders of the narrowly constructed coalition that assumed majority control in the Knesset after the last elections. I'll introduce our panel in a moment. First, I want to talk with you about why the Center for American Progress is focusing on this crisis and will continue this panel series on crises that friends in other democracies, such as India and Mexico, are also facing. It's not only that we in the United States have become much more acquainted here at home in recent years with the fragility of our own democratic experiment. At American Progress, we are zeroed in on the import of accountability to and for democracy, exploring how we ensure a rule of law and not just a rule by law, and examining the roles that courts play in democracies around the world in protecting minority rights, even as majorities control legislatures or executive offices. Threats to democracy have reached a crescendo here at home and abroad in recent years. The next 2 years represents a critical period that requires we at American Progress to remain laser focused on executing a strategic way forward that will increase chances for America and the world to make progress for democracy. We aim through our work to maximize democratic accountability and safeguards both at home and abroad. For us at CAP and relevant to this event, this includes building foundational support for generational change in US courts, such that the role, perception, and reality of Supreme Court decision-making shifts. We understand that the United States is facing complex, urgent, and interconnected crises alongside too many other countries. Strong, accountable democracy best equips the United States and other like-minded partners to address current and future challenges. So having offered you some context and why we're holding this conversation at American Progress, let me explain why now with this panel. Israel has experienced some of the largest protests in its history that, particularly in the days surrounding the firing of the defense minister, included voices from across Israeli society, military reservists, union workers, business leaders, and religious leaders, and more. These protests brought Israel to a standstill and led to the reinstatement of the defense minister and to Prime Minister Netanyahu's announcement that he would pause advancement of the judicial overhaul legislation so that President Herzog might work with all parties towards sustainable compromise. That work is ongoing with some very tough June dates approaching. There are multiple elements contributing to the crisis surrounding the judicial overhaul process from proposals. I expect our panel will explore these elements in some detail. At the heart of these challenging questions for any democracy, and clearly in the crosshairs for Israeli democracy, is how a democracy is led by majority rule achieved through fair and free elections, and yet provides concrete protections for minority rights. So often it is courts that are counted on in this capacity, and so often there's a careful balance involved to get it right. And so with that, I will turn this over to our terrific panel, who will delve into these thorny questions that Israel's in the midst of confronting. Kate Donald, our moderator, leads our democratic accountability work at American Progress, in addition to moderating this discussion today. Joining Kate on the panel are David Kretzmer, who is a professor emeritus of constitutional and international law at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Erel Margalit, founder and chairman, Jerusalem Venture Partners, is an important architect of Israel's startup nation, known for bringing innovation and entrepreneurial leadership to the country's most pressing economic and social challenges. Erel also is a former member of Knesset. Thabet Rass is the co-executive director of the Abraham Initiatives, a nonprofit organization that hopes to create widespread positive social change in the field of Jewish-Arab relations in Israel. And Tal Schneider is an award-winning political and diplomatic correspondent for the Times of Israel. We are so pleased and appreciative to have all of you joining us for this conversation. Thank you. And over to you, Kate.
Erel, we are going to turn to you now. Thank you so much for being here in your very, very busy schedule. Just to remind everyone, Mara introduced Erel briefly earlier, but Erel is the founder and chairman of JVP and Margalit Startup City, bringing innovation and entrepreneurial leadership to the country's most pressing economic and social challenges. And he's also a former member of the Knesset. So Erel, we only have you here for a short time, so I'm going to kind of cluster your questions together rather than spread them out as I've been doing with the other panelists. But really, the reason why, among many reasons why your perspective is so valuable here is because obviously, Israel has a really thriving tech and business sector. And you've been very outspoken about what you see as the potential impacts of the judicial overhaul and democratic backsliding in general on that tech and business sector in Israel. So if you can tell us a little bit about how you see that impact and what you've been hearing from investors, particularly foreign business investors. Thank you, Erel.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And yes, I do think I'm actually in New York right now with 38 Israeli companies signing some agreements with the city of New York, and actually with a big cooperative effort with Australia. So we have a peace agreement with Australia now here in New York, but it's wonderful. So look, I think that what this government did is it woke Israel up. And I think that many of us who didn't necessarily understand that political involvement is part of what you need to be doing in Israel in order to continue to do the kind of things you want to do on innovation, on inventiveness, on high tech. You cannot just stand on the side and not be involved. So in the last 20 years or so, we've made one of the biggest economic revolutions that I think occurred anywhere in the world, taking Israel from a very Bolshevistic economy to an open, that's part of it's the fault of my party as well at the time, to an economy that's an innovative economy, works internationally, creates things in a way that's innovative and interesting, and involves many of the international countries in what we're doing. And then suddenly this government came and threatened our way of life in a most fundamental sense. The issues of occupations and the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian questions did not rally the Israeli public like it's rallying this now. And what I would call ourselves to focus is to focus on the moment of opportunity, because the protests are very much known for what they're doing in Kaplan in Tel Aviv. But I actually am part of the protest all over the country. I'm part of the protest where in Kiryat Shmona, in the far north, where we have our food tech center, about 4 kilometers from the Lebanese border, people from Kiryat Shmona in the kibbutzim, it's a big social debate, and the Jews and the Arabs are going out to demonstrate in a way that was never demonstrated in that city. In Jerusalem, religious and secular are demonstrating. Some of the Arab population is demonstrating as well. In different parts of the country, there's an awakening. And what I think we realized is that we can win. We may not be able to win immediately in the Knesset, but we can win. We are much stronger than the political landscape is showing. And so we got up, we spoke. It's both the high-tech sector, it's the doctors, it's the people from the special units, it's the pilots, it's the people from all over the country, it's the social entrepreneurs. We got up to speak, and we were able to stop the judicial reform. I can say that we stopped it. I mean, they can take any excuse they want. They're not going to be able to complete it. So that's number one. Number two, what we're seeing is a craziness in terms of the in terms of this government in more than one way. When you're seeing Ben Gvir go up to the Temple Mountain, and after years of working together in Jerusalem with the Palestinian community and trying to get some sort of normalcy. Remember, JVP was established when the second Intifada was happening. We were creating the high-tech industry, not in ideal terms. But we had security issues, we had political issues. It was after Rabin was assassinated. It was not easy in this country to go and create something that was creative and collaborative and actually has was able to transform the country. But they're trying to take us back. Even on the ultra-Orthodox side, in the last 15 years, I was involved in getting about 15,000 ultra-Orthodox women and about 5,000 ultra-Orthodox men into the high-tech sector. In Jerusalem, 7,300 of the women that are employed in the high-tech sector are ultra-Orthodox. What they did now with the budget is they've taken Israel years back. So the universities for the ultra-Orthodox men and women, the things that we were able to create in order to create a bridge to working into jobs rather than just the army, is something that they're trying to undermine. And I can tell you that the ultra-Orthodox public is not going to agree to that. So we're going to go above the politician's head. What they're doing today is one of their biggest mistakes after the judicial reform, because we are going to rise and say no. The next thing is, so what's happening with all that in terms of Israel and the region? You need to understand that in the last 3 years, the kind of things that we've been doing in the region with the UAE, with Saudi Arabia, with Jordan, with Egypt, with Morocco is unheard of. And by the way, we're cooperating with the Palestinians, even though that officially the Palestinians are not, in the way that the agreements were signed. We're cooperating. Jerusalem is one of these cities where you have Palestinians who get up in the morning and go to Amman and Abu Dhabi and Riyadh, and you have people on the west side that get up in the morning and go to London and Paris. So Tel Aviv may be considered the exciting city of Israel. Jerusalem, in the next phase, with the right kind of leadership, can be the exciting city of the Middle East, because we actually have Arabs and Jews, Palestinians and Israelis together working in one city, trying to make sense out of it when the politicians are trying to take us back. So what's going to happen? I don't think that this government is strong as it looks like. I think that the Israeli public is much stronger, and I think that we need a few more incentives to wake ourselves up. I still don't think a lot of it is translated immediately into politics. So I think that the fact that Gantz and Lapid and some of the centralist parties are getting a lot of the votes is great, but there's still no framework of the alternative leadership. The leadership that speaks about a joint venture with the Palestinians in the region. The leadership that speaks about integrating 7 regions in the country into the high-tech revolution. The leadership that talks about economic development as a way to bring people together socially, not just economically, and to do something that really matters. The fact that Israel is now working with so many other Arab countries in the region is also an awakening to look at the Palestinians in a different way, and to look at what the Palestinians and the Israelis can do together as part of the new chapter of this region. It's more than just Israel. I mean, the young Arab community in the region is looking for new ideas, is looking for ways to be integrated in projects of employment, of healthcare, of agriculture, of food tech, of fintech, of different things that can be done. We're together with some Palestinians in Jerusalem, we're talking about the power of Yalla. 10 cities, 10 ideas, 10 projects in the Middle East that will change the way you think about the Middle East, the Gulf, and our region in a way that would make things a lot more interesting. Now, Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, these guys are clowns. They have the control of the country right now, but they're clowns. They don't have a holding among most of the Israeli public. And the nice thing that's happening right now, and occupation is not the word that unifies people on the left and right. It doesn't. It just is not the right word to use right now. The word that unifies people is democracy. The word that unifies people is the Declaration of Independence. Yes, we are not perfect. We are a Jewish state and a democratic state, but that's who we are. And we're working with the Arab community in order to give voice to a lot of other Israelis that are not Jewish, in the same way that we're giving voices to Israelis that are Jewish. And we're trying to create a framework which is different. Are we close? No, we're close to stopping Netanyahu. We're still not close to creating a vision which will bring people together in a way that will overcome these extreme forces. We have to remember that extremism, zealots, is not the first time that we see it in the Jewish tradition. I mean, part of the destruction of the first and second temple had to do with zealots that were just not compromising and breaking our people apart. In Jerusalem, we see it every day. we see zealots. We're going to have Jerusalem Day in a few days, tomorrow. Tomorrow is the march, and we're going to have two kinds of marches. One march is speaking against the Palestinians of the city, people that we're working with every day, trying to create a soccer league, an education project, a business together. We're working with the Palestinian community every day in Jerusalem. There's so many good things that are happening that are not publicized, that are not media worthy to some of the news agencies, but that we are working on together. Jerusalem is not like it was in 2002. Jerusalem is in a different place. However, there's still no framework that takes us to sort of a political solution, recognizes people's identity, recognizes people's dignity, and takes a lot of the things that are happening on the ground into a framework which takes Israel to the next level. That's still not happening. But what is happening, we're going to be stopping Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, these guys, the more extreme aspects and things that they will do right now, the bigger is the grave that they're digging for themselves in the medium term. And I say this now with confidence. I say it now because a lot of the Bennett crowd, people that are the Dati Leumi, people that are the religious national people that are not extreme, are speaking out and standing with us. I don't agree on everything with them, but I agree on enough in order to speak out against the extremists. And the more extreme Ben Gvir is, the more we have a common denominator, a bigger common denominator to unify and to say something. No, this is not the way. We need a different way. Even if we don't agree on everything, we have sort of sanity that needs to come back into the system.
Thank you so much, Erel, and really note the note of optimism there, which is really nice to hear. Could you also, I know we only have a few minutes left with you, but could you talk a little bit about what you see as the kind of connections between, or the relationships between stable democracies and kind of startup culture? Like how you see those things being linked, and how kind of Israel's culture of innovation is linked to its kind of tradition of democracy.
Yeah, I mean, I think democracy and pluralism and having different people from different backgrounds is actually what made us succeed. And you can undermine a lot of the creativity. And I think that what we never expressed in a way that was clear is also our set of values, not just our eagerness to succeed economically and invent things. And that's what we're getting now. And I think that what's happening in Israel will need to happen in other countries around the world as well. You'll find yourself in the US needing to stand up for democracy in ways that you didn't expect. You'll find in France, they're going to stand up to democracy in the next election, and it's going to be a big threat on Macron's reign and some of the parties that will want sort of whatever form of democracy that's going to be threatened. You're seeing this in other parts of Europe. You're seeing it even in countries like, Scandinavian countries where suddenly democracies is being threatened. So I think that the center left needs to get its act together. It needs to understand that power is part of the game, even though it comes with ethics, and it needs to express itself. Economic development is not something that belongs to the right. It's something that belongs to the right and to the left together. And economic development with inclusion, with bringing more people into the creative process, with having the Arab community in Israel be part of the high-tech sector, with having the ultra-Orthodox part of the high-tech sector, which having the Galilee or the South part of what's happening beyond Tel Aviv is becoming a big statement for us, in addition to innovation and inventing new things. And I think that kind of common denomination is going to be something that we cooperate around the world, but it needs to be crystallized. I think the international leadership is weak in expressing the values and the direction of where we're trying to go against some of the other extreme forces that are out there. And if we're not going to get our act together, people are going to step all over us, just like Bibi tried in Israel.
Thank you so much, Erel, and that's really salutary. And indeed, we are watching many developments in the US and in other countries with much concern in this regard. Tal, I'm going to turn back